Hello everyone, welcome to our second episode of DevStandup. And as I promised that every week at least we're gonna have one workshop in a DevStandup. And today we have also like a really interesting topic. And guys, one note is that like if you feel that you would like to share also your kind of experience from like your kind of technology you are already confident with, please fill in the form in the description and our team like will contact you and you can have like free microphone and basically share your experience with others. And without wasting any time, I'm gonna give the floor to our guest speaker Atakan. Let's start.
Thank you, Honor. Very appreciated. So, hello everyone. I'm Atakan. I'm back for the second episode of the Dev Stand Up, and today I want to talk about using the OpenTelemetry for your small project and why. So, for those who didn't watch the first episode, we were talking about this hobby project application, and this is a story we had on the development of its backend. So, and why we chose OTel for it. So, first, let's start with the application, or the backend. So the backend was a very simple one. We just have a MongoDB server where we store the data, and we have a Node.js server, and this is getting directly served to the user, right? This was running on our development machine for a long time, and once we want to get into some testing phases where one load wasn't enough, we decided to use like some SO reuse address tricks to run multiple Node.js servers to handle more requests because Node.js is not multi-threaded. And our setup was still in a single machine, but it was more or less like this. We just had a MongoDB, the logs were being written, we were monitoring the metrics from just the single where this VM is running on the VPS. So when we decided to Dockerize it, containerize it, we used Docker. We had multiple tasks of this Node.js server running, and since we only had one host, Docker host for it, which was on an EC2 machine. We only had the container logs, we had some load balancer, and it was going to the user. This is a fairly easy setup because now you still have access to, like, you only need to monitor only one instance metrics and one instance container logs, so you can just pull them from the Docker. And things got a bit tricky once we decided to have multiple Docker hosts. So we have now different tasks running on different machines with their own logs. So we had to have a log collector. So initially we decided to go with the logging. Now we installed the Promtail agents, we have the Loki collectors and everything, and our infrastructure for a hobby project was getting a bit big. So it didn't. Then we realized that it didn't stop there because now we have everything stored in a Loki, and we have the agents are running. Now where is gonna be where we are gonna query them? So now we also had to run a Grafana server on top of all of them, and this is just for the logs. So when we wanted to have some, metrics and traces and things like that, we also had to introduce a Prometheus into this infrastructure. And on top of that, we had to set up some alerts, which requires some other services or other Grafana plugins to interface them. So once we got to this level, we realized that because you had the Grafana timing out, you had the Loki running out of storage, you had the Prometheus, Prometheus or internally, the InfluxDB and everything getting blown up and everything. Then we realized that we should, since this is this is like a 2 developer project. So since we said this is our hobby project, we don't have time to run it, we decided to simplify things. So how did we simplify it? So before simplifying, we first decided to use, let's say, okay, we are going to host this on AWS using the EC2 free tier and the MongoDB RDS free tier. So let's just check the pricing on the AWS, right? Let's just send our logs to CloudWatch. Let's send our metrics to CloudWatch. Let's do everything. Then we quickly realized that, yes, for free tiers, we have 10 custom metrics. That is nice. That was okay because we didn't have lots of metrics planned. But what we saw that the first 5 gigabytes of the logs were free. So if we suddenly got some influx of logs, let's say some errors or everything, and since this is an Node.js project, you can have a very big, very big stack traces. We realized that, hey, if we didn't monitor this enough, we are gonna be start paying 50 cents per gigabyte stored, which I don't know if we would hit there, but there is a possibility of hitting there. And on top of that, we were also paying 3 cents per gigabyte month for the storage, and on top of that, the querying those. So dashboards. Additionally, we didn't have any dashboards planned in our heads, and on maybe on one dashboard would be nice. So dashboard wasn't that of a problem, but dashboard cost was also included into log inside queries and getting the queries from the CloudWatch. And first 10 alarms are free. That is okay, but setting the alarms up, we had to also set a SNS topic up, send us a notification. But that part is, I don't think it was gonna cost a lot. But our main concern was the logs themselves. So also there was also this issue of if you do the problem with AWS, especially using them for these kind of hobby projects, is if you forget to update something on this pipeline. Let's say you had this EC2 running in an old instance. If you forget it, you suddenly occur a big amounts, even if you're new, even if you're experienced. So that's the rule of AWS. So we didn't want to add this. So what we end up doing is we wanted to use the OpenTelemetry for our logging, tracing, and metrics, because OpenTelemetry is a vendor neutral and open source telemetry format. I think this is for the last 2 years, this is becoming the main standard, because prior to OpenTelemetry, there was Open Tracing, which were trying to unify everything, but you have the Zipkin format, you have the baggage format, you have the Datadog format, you have the hotshots and everything. It was this is trying to standardize it. OpenTelemetry supports multiple languages, so I mean, in our case, it was just Node.js, but we also had some Go services, which I will also do this demo today in the Go, where you can have just SDK that will support most libraries out of the box and just do auto tracing for you. If you don't need to set up the connection to the MongoDB, it will just hook it up by itself and send you and make your traces. And as I said at the beginning, it's a unified framework, so we only need to focus on one thing to send the traces and the metrics and our logs. And on top of that, it has its own collector agent, so that has support for these, so that is officially supported. So we didn't have to put some ingestion pipelines and everything. So our infra then became like this, right? We have the auto agents now doing the collections and sending them to OpenSearch, which I will come later. But since we selected OpenSearch, the OpenSearch is a Elasticsearch port. It also comes with Kibana or OpenSearch dashboards that is renamed. So we didn't have to use Grafana anymore. So OpenSearch is a fork of the Elasticsearch. Just to give a quick insight on what it is. It's a fork of Elasticsearch by AWS. And it is essentially the full-featured Elasticsearch. On top of that, it also has the dashboard, like Kibana fork. However, it also has the built-in support for OpenTelemetry format. So it can build your dashboards, it can give you this traces search, and it gives you this log search. Of course, and this is what our final infrastructure gonna look like. We had an auto agent running as a task or on the host machines, and we have the OpenSearch where we push all our data, store all our data, and also where we have the dashboards, alerts, metrics, and everything. Speaking of metrics, in this example, on today's workshop, I'm not going to include the metrics because the metrics we didn't need to use the metrics on our this project. So if you want to use the metrics with OTel, though, with the OpenSearch, you need to also have the data prepper. There is a pull request for the OTel agent to send them directly to OpenSearch, like the traces and the logs. But for today's infrastructure, this is what we're gonna have. So let me get started. So I have a Docker Compose file where I have my OpenSearch with password of test at DevStandup123. I have the OpenSearch dashboards and I have the storage of it. So let me quickly get that up. While that is coming up, I want to show the OTel agent. So this here OTel collector is essentially OpenTelemetry's agent. So, and you give them with this configuration files. So in here I have a basic configuration file where I say I want to receive the OTel requests from HTTP and gRPC. In today's workshop, I'm going to just use HTTP. I have this extension to authenticate, just to give the client authentication to authenticate with my OpenSearch cluster. I have an exporter for OpenSearch trace and OpenSearch log. And I have a processor, so I want to batch my requests. So I have a processor where I say either batch them for a second or when I hit the limit of 50%. I have a resource detector to get the environment variables and the system's current metrics as a metadata of the traces and metrics I have. Also the logs. You can also extend this with AWS and other things, but since this is on the local, I'm just gonna have the environment and system. And I have in here my pipelines where I will receive my OTel logs and OTel traces, batch them with the processor, and export them to traces to the OpenSearch trace and logs to the OpenSearch log. These files can be available, I think, on the down the video on the repo. But after downloading the OTel collector, we just run it, and now it is active and it's listening. So this is what we are gonna have running on our Docker host or on ECS tasks or Docker tasks. So in here I have a small project. I have the OTel endpoint set as the localhost because I'm running on my machine. I have a new logger provider where I will send all the logs. As you see, I have a logger instance. And I have a tracer, my traces and the auto tracing, and I'm using the Gym middleware, which comes inside the OTel's own library. So as I said, like it is a support of a variety of languages, and this packages for each language. SDKs has out of box support for most of the popular tools like the Redis, MongoDB, and everything. Or in this case, Gin framework. So I have one route where I want to have the ping. It will just return a pong, but it will start also a handler for this operation, and it will also log me that ping endpoint was called. I also have a route for error that will always throw a 500. It will say the error endpoint was called and I also want to simulate the error response in here. So as you see, I also put an error handler in. So let me quickly run this project too. So let me go to my OpenSearch dashboards. As you see, we have the OpenSearch dashboard here. On the OpenSearch dashboards, it comes by default that you have the observability tab here, where you have the applications, log, the metrics, traces, the notebooks, and dashboards. So I already had an application here. I will just delete that. I'm going to create a new one. So I want to have, I'm calling it DevStandup. And as a log source, you can select, this is when you don't set up anything on the OTel's collector. This is the log index that you will get when you first run it. This can change on your configuration, but this is the one that I will use. And I just say create and set availability. So on the last 5 minutes, I don't have any log events. So I will quickly go to 8080 ping, and as you see, I'll press it 5 times, and these will be shipped to my OpenSearch cluster, and now I have the access to logs. I can view them, I can run, I can see some metadata that, oh, the Go version is this service. I didn't set a service name, but the service name came there. This is the scope of there are some metadata and also the body, which is the log message. So I can include more metadata with the OTel's libraries, but this is just for the, like, showing that how simple that you can just use for your hobby project, not the whole using the hotel as a scale, but you can also use this as a scale with other things. And you can also get the, let's also check our traces. So in this 5 minutes, as you see, I have some spans here. So spans are subtraces, and you have the parent span IDs. But of course, in this page, it is not very, like, they are displayed as per span. So if I go to the main traces dashboards, I will see them in parent as a parent spans. So what the spans do is, when I go here and when I go to tree view, let's say I can have the whole story of what happened on the route, like someone called to get ping, and ping handler ran, and it returned, and the route was handed and finished without any errors. So imagine there is the MongoDB receive, database queries, Redis get, and everything, and you can see the timelines of everything. And additionally, so I have the traces and I have the logs. Also, I can use this on the OpenSearch on alerting, because these are just stored as in the indexes. So I can use normal, let's say, error rate alert, where I can just make a visual editor by interval every 1 minute on this cluster. Go to my hotel traces. The time field is the start time, and I want to say if the count of documents with status code, let's say status code is not 200, then I want to have some alerts. So to see this, for instance, every 1 minute, I will also add a trigger to this just to show it. Trigger test is above 1. Save. So we just wait until it hits. So let's create more alerts. I don't know if there was a way to, oh yeah, there you go. Now we received an alert. So right now this didn't have any outputs, but you can connect this to your Slack bot, Discord, Telegram, or any other platform. In here I will just acknowledge it. And yeah. So yeah, basically in our small hobby project, we decided to use the OpenSearch with the OpenTelemetry just to quickly have our observability and alerting issues. And I just want to share as our experience and how to quickly set it up on this today's DevStandup. Yep, that's all from me. Back to you, Eller.
Yeah, thanks for your this great workshop about the OpenTelemetry. I got a couple of questions that, like, let's say you showed us in your OpenSearch, but for example, let's say if the teams are using Elasticsearch, like, is it still possible, like, using this OpenTelemetry kind of plugin in the container and send it to the Elasticsearch, or?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't use Elasticsearch for a long time. I mean, since the OpenSearch announcement. But as I remember, Elasticsearch also has now native support for the OpenTelemetry. And on top of that, you can connect your OpenSearch and Elasticsearch as a connector to the OpenTelemetry, and also like pull their information from these collectors too. But last time I checked, yeah, you can also use on the Elasticsearch. It's just we didn't want to go through that way because the idea here was using something free. So that's why we chose the OpenSearch.
All right. My second question is that, let's say right now, like, most of the teams are using Kubernetes. How this OpenTelemetry fits into the Kubernetes ecosystem and experience there?
I mean, you can have the tracing and still you can have the tracing and metrics through the OpenTelemetry. For the log collection, you can connect, I think, the Kubernetes to ship the logs to the container, the pod logs to to hotel and to the hotel collector. Then from there, you can export it to anywhere. So that's what it allows you to do. So if you just spend some time to convert your, I mean, this is for not for the hobby project, but for actually for the hobby project, that also makes sense because once you get into a level where your hobby project is growing up, you don't need to go and reinvent the metrics and everything or logging because you already have the agent. You can have it configured to publish it to existing data sources because you are not logged into the OpenSearch. You can still public convert it to Datadog. You can still convert to CloudWatch. So I can actually like receive from here and still send it to CloudWatch, right? So how it fits there is you can use it as an agent, and once you get to a point where you're comfortable with, you can just switch to OpenTelemetry to altogether. So I think that's how it fits. I don't know if that's a correct answer, but it's just I also didn't work with Kubernetes that much, but that's what I know.
Yeah, and last question was that like while you were working this OpenTelemetry, what was the main disadvantages you have experienced that you would like to have in there, maybe next patch or something?
My disadvantages are I mean, I worked it for my hobby project and also in my work. The disadvantages that we had during the hobby project is setting it up, like setting it up the agent in a budget is a bit. Sorry, not the setting up, but the setting up part where you need to refactor your code after you wrote it because we switched that off in the middle of the project, right, for our hobby project. So the problem there was we had to go back and add all the operations, the span types and everything because we weren't using any. Our solution was a bit customized, so the auto tracing didn't work there for this hobby project. So we had to use some things. But for when I had on my day job, but I had some experience with OpenTelemetry there too. It was the mapping. So the metadata that OpenTelemetry sends is a bit quite a lot when you enable the auto tracing mode. So it sends the current memory usage, the version of the SDK, the node version, how much version you have, how much RAM you have available on the node, and these can, especially if you're on a scale that like you're getting thousands of requests a second, this is going to make your like cluster a bit like you are storing essentially unnecessary data. So that was the like figuring those out and filtering those out were one of my biggest challenges on day job. But for the hobby project, it was most of the implementation part because we decided to switch it on the middle of the project.
So it means that let's say if this OpenTelemetry is running in cloud and you forget like to filter out this metrics from the logs, and one time like when you just figure out okay it just pumps a lot of logs, it can cost a lot of money, right?
Yeah, that's the as I showed on the I think it was a fourth slide where even if you are doing that. I always refer back to this image where even if you're new or experienced to the cloud, this is not limited to AWS, but you can still do accidents. So yeah, that's all I can say.
All right. Okay, thanks so much for your great experience. I hope it's gonna be useful for people who are watching this workshop. And guys, that's it for our second episode of the Dev Stand Up. And as I mentioned already, like if you would like to have like a free microphone to share your experience in IT, please fill in the form in the description. And next time, maybe you can be our next guest. So thanks guys for watching and see you in our next Dev Stand Up. Bye.